The Rurouni Kenshin manga was so much better than the anime. The anime is one of my favorite series of all time, and there's nothing that can change that for me, but with the manga, there's so many great experiences within all of this that I have to say that this is the definitive way to experience the Kenshin story. There are so many great things here. So for this review, I'm not going to be getting into the basics of what the Kenshin story is. I'm going to save that for my anime review, which should be out sometime within the next week or so, whenever I finish rewatching that for I don't even know how many times. I've lost count of how many times I've seen it, to be honest, probably like 5 or 6, but with the Kenshin manga, there's so much more content here that if you're just watching the anime, you're missing out on so much, because there are about 3.5 volumes like this size here, with exclusive content that you will not see within the anime. Plus, this has an ending to it. You don't get that within the anime. You get some filler ending, but this has a perfect ending, which beautifully wraps everything up. I'm not going to spoil anything, obviously, but I really love the ending of this series. So taking a look at the 3 arcs within the Rurouni Kenshin manga, the first 2 are just like within the anime. The first arc is where Kenshin meets Kaoru. He stays at her dojo and he fights a few small-time enemies. Now, my first time around, when reading this, I did enjoy that, even though I'd already seen the anime countless times at this point. However, I do feel that the first arc is a bit slow-paced and can be a bit boring at times, just because I've seen it so many times, but my first time around I did find numerous things to enjoy about the first arc. However, the second arc is a complete 180 because it's not these small series of events. It's not really episodic or anything. The second arc is the Kyoto arc, which is arguably one of the best arcs within shonen anime, and it's the same within the manga as well. So with Kenshin's second arc set in Kyoto, things get much more serious, and it's one major overall story that spans throughout the entire arc instead of having these mini events which you've seen in the first arc itself. So within the second arc, the major antagonist is Makoto Shishio, who is Kenshin's replacement. For once Kenshin stepped down as the manslayer, as this assassin, he stepped down, and Makoto Shishio was his replacement, so needless to say that he is a very strong opponent, and of course he is not alone. He has his Jupan Gatana, which is 10 swordsmen, which he has with him, who also share his goal of taking down the new government within Japan. So what makes this Kyoto arc so great is that not only do you get great character development for Kenshin when he undergoes the final secrets of the Hiten Mitsurugi training and learns a new reason to live, but also you get the development of his friends as well. And I really like the development with Sanosuke here, where he has this bonding with one of his enemies in the Jupan Gatana, and that's also one of the things that make this arc so great, is that you have such great stories for all of the enemies as well. So we have most of Kenshin's friends that he met within the first season, or the first 3 or so volumes of the manga, meeting up with everyone from the beginning of the Kyoto arc that he met from the Oniwaban group. They come together and they bond and they fight together, so that's really interesting. And also on the antagonist side, you have Makoto Shishio, who's got a touching story as well. When he tells a story, you can feel for him, because if it was not for Kenshin stepping down, it would be probable that Kenshin would have that same fate that Makoto Shishio has, and it's only right that he looks for justice with this. But then also you have his other Jupan Gatana members, so you have another antagonist, Sojiro, who has passed deeply ties with Makoto Shishio because he looks up to him as being one of his heroes, because he saved him from a life of slavery, and he is really messed up because of the life that he lived. He also has this deep story that you can really feel for him despite him being one of the villains of the story, and I always wanted to see more of him. That is probably one of the flaws of the series, is that you only see him within the Kyoto arc. I want to see a spin-off series. I want to see what he did with his life after the series ended. So moving on to my favorite character out of all of the Jupan Gatana, who is Anji, the fallen monk. He also has a very sad past as well, where he ran a Buddhist monastery, which was also an orphanage for young children in the area, and because of certain problems, which I'm not going to spoil, just like with everybody else's story, I'm not going to give too much detail about it because I still want you to enjoy everyone's small little backstory that you'll learn about. all of those kids die, and because of this, he has such hatred for the Meiji government, and it's very interesting to watch him interact with the other Jupan members, because he is not so evil and cold-hearted like all of them. He will actually stop certain people from getting killed within the Kyoto arc because he only wants the deaths of Meiji government officials. And then we have all of the other Jupan members, which were pretty good characters, but I didn't enjoy them nearly as much as Anji, Sojiro, or Makoto Shishio. So aside from the great development that you get, the interaction between Kenshin's old friends, his new friends, the antagonists and the protagonists within themselves in the Jupan we have such amazing fights here. Some of my favorite fights out of all of anime, out of all of manga. We have Anji versus Sanosuke, which was an amazing fight. We have Cho versus Kenshin, which was also a great moment as well. However, I did like that fight a bit more within the anime. Maybe it's because I'm just such an anime fanboy for the series that I really love that fight, and it's one of my favorite moments of all time. And we also have the amazing fights of Sojiro, of Aoshi Shinomori, and of course, I can't even not mention this, the fight of Makoto Shishio. Of course, that is an obvious given that that was a really good fight. All of these fights were very similar to the fights within the anime, so I probably enjoyed most of the fights in the anime more just because it's simply animated. But within the manga, with this art style here, just looking at the expression on everybody's faces and the way everything was shaded, it was beautiful watching these fights all over again. It's like seeing it from a whole new perspective. So moving on from the Kyoto arc into Kenshin's third and final arc, which is huge. There is so much coverage within this final arc. First of all, Kenshin's past is covered. Everything from the Trust and Betrayal OVA collection, that's covered here, but of course, I have to say that I enjoyed the Trust and Betrayal OVA collection much more than its portrayal within the manga, and also a bit of a fun fact that you'll only learn from reading the manga, or maybe you Google it, or maybe you just take my word on it because I learned it from the manga, that the OVA collection of Trust and Betrayal was actually in the works before they ever got to that part in the manga series, so it's possible that that's why the manga portrayal of this wasn't as good as the OVAs, in my opinion, just because I felt that the OVAs were a bit more dramatic and there was a bit more detail into certain things. This story from Samurai X, Trust and Betrayal, and Kenshin's backstory only leads up to everything within the final arc. This isn't just a backstory, it's a beginning to this amazing arc within the story. And here we have a shadow from Kenshin's past coming back to haunt him, and this character is psychotic. There are some crazy things that happen. There were some things which, of course, I will not name, but I think that everybody else probably felt the same way. When I turned that page and I saw that image of what this character, this evil antagonist, had done, I had to set the manga down. I had to take a break. I didn't even know what to think because I thought that what happened was completely impossible in this story. So because of this shocking, mind-blowing event, it causes this chain reaction of events to unfold and force the characters of Kenshin, Yahiko, and Sanosuke to evolve and develop. With Kenshin, it causes this huge emotional rift where we have never seen him go so low. With Sanosuke, we see more about his past, we learn more about his history, more than just about the Seki Hotai group, and we see him really change and grow as a character as well. And of course, with Yahiko finally living up to his expectations of the son of a strong Tokyo samurai, and he really steps up to the plate here and becomes a man. He starts fighting in some of the major fights within this arc, and we see Yahiko taking a beating. We'll see him sitting there covered in blood, continuing to fight, and I think it's kind of strange that he continues to fight these enemies which are trying to kill him, but all he has is a bamboo sword. His Shina, he wouldn't even upgrade to a Boken, which is just a wood sword. He has that soft bamboo sword, which of course would still hurt if it hits you. That's really besides the point, but within this third arc of Kenshin, we get more character development for Kenshin, for Sanosuke, and also Yahiko than we do throughout the entire manga series. So in this third arc, the shadow from Kenshin's past coming forward for revenge, with all of these other people in a group which also seek revenge from Kenshin. Honestly, these characters were weak. They were physically weak. I don't see how they were expecting them to be stronger than the Jupan Gatana. They had a weak story, and I really didn't care for any of these characters at all. They didn't leave a lasting impression. They weren't really all that strong, and they didn't really push the characters as far as they were being pushed in the Kyoto arc. I think that maybe because the story was coming to a close, Watsuki was just throwing everything in and using all of these concept characters that he wanted to use but never found a reason for, but it just came out as being kind of weak, honestly. These characters, they were physically weak, their stories were weak, they had grudges with Kenshin, but because he defeated their teacher, or he cut off his arm, or things like that, they were very weak stories in comparison to the great stories that we had from the antagonist in the Jupan Gatana from the second arc. So these characters, they were pretty weak, they had a bad story, and I didn't really care for them, but it doesn't leave a lasting stain on the arc itself, because the major parts here, like I said, was the amazing character development, and also the fight and the interaction between this person from Kenshin's past and also Kenshin, and of course, the internal struggle with Kenshin himself. So that's all I can really say about the 3 arcs within Kenshin. I don't want to spoil too much, but I would love to just sit around and talk about that 3rd arc all day long and just tell you about everything, because I really did enjoy it. But looking at the Kenshin series as a whole, there are many reasons why I love this series. First of all, there's so much inspiration and so much excitement from Watsuki when he was creating this that you can see. There are so many little personal notes from him that you can see within the manga series, and also there are so many great characters. There are characters within the first few chapters that stay relevant throughout the entirety of the series, and it's kind of that way to a flaw, because there are so many great characters that you want to see more of them. My point in case would be Sojiro from the 2nd arc from Kyoto. I really want to see what happens to him. He needs to have some sort of spin-off story. I want to see what he does with his life. All of these great characters stand apart from one another. You will not find 2 alike. Everyone has their own personality, it feels. Maybe it's just because I'm such a huge Kenshin fan. I really like all of these characters, and just to finally see them get their story wrap up that they finally deserve, of course, aside from Sojiro, but just to see them have that final wrap up and that final definitive end that I've been needing for all these years after watching the anime, it is just this complete feeling. So moving on from the characters to the actual fight itself, this is a shonen series, obviously, so it's going to be very heavy in the fighting. Don't get me wrong, the fights in the manga were great, but there was just something about the fights in the anime that I enjoyed most of them a lot more, because within the series of Kenshin, you will have characters with godlike speed fighting against each other, and just seeing one panel on one page and then turning to page and just see other panels, it's just not the same as seeing it actually animated, and I feel that the anime did great justice to the fights that they did cover within the manga. Just as an example of why these fights need to be animated, there was a fight within the 3rd arc here where Sanosuke fought against 200 men by himself, barehanded, and it was like 4 panels. It does it no justice. The rest of the series needs to be animated properly, not like those recent Kyoto OVA remakes, which were terrible in my opinion. So while the fights in this series were epic, and believe me, they were, the major point of excitement for me, the major point of enjoyment out of all of this series here was going to be the story and the characters. Those are the things that I enjoyed the most from the Kenshin manga series. Moving on to another great thing about this manga is the artwork. The artwork is beautiful throughout the entirety of the manga series, not just with the color here, but with everything black and white. The art quality does not drop at all, only in certain like joke scenes where it's supposed to do that, but throughout the entirety of all of this 9 volumes of this, the art quality does not drop. It stays very consistent. The shading here is beautiful because Watsuki will use this very flat, dark black for the backgrounds, and then with the characters' faces to show emotions or to show speed with the sword. He will use a great shading technique there as well, and not only do you get a feeling for the emotion of all the characters, but a feeling of speed within the fights. But of course, with fights this great, I feel that the manga does not justify it. We need animation. So if you're looking to buy the Rurouni Kenshin manga, I highly recommend that you check out these VizBigs, not only because the pages are so thick, or the color artwork that you get, or the bonus notes that you get from Watsuki himself, but it comes with a lot of bonus things. Like, say for example, there is a bonus chapter at the end of this final volume here which covers Yahiko's life after the ending of the manga, and I'm so excited to read that, and I'll even do a review of that chapter in itself probably next week, or maybe sometime later this week, probably before I do the complete anime review, but it's set after the ending of the series. Now, one big flaw with these, in my opinion, some people say it's the spines, but I never had any problems with the spine, honestly. But with these notes that you get from Watsuki himself, he seems very inconfident with everything that he does. Like, after every arc, even after the Kyoto arc himself, he says that he was embarrassed, that it wasn't as good as it needed to be. Or with characters, you will have some of these characters which you will really love, and then you'll read the notes about what their inspiration is, and it was just something from a video game that he played, and it's kind of a downer in my opinion. It's a downer to really get fixed on these characters and the events and really fall in love with the story and its characters just to see, oh, I wasn't happy with it, I didn't think I would do that great of a job, or these characters, it was just something that I didn't even plan on using, or something like that. So with the Rurouni Kenshin manga series as a whole, it was a complete and total enjoyment. Of course, it was not perfect. Like I said, the fights need to be animated. That third arc in general needs to be animated. And of course, there were a few small problems that I don't even really care to talk about because they don't really impact the story. But this series, I recommend this to everyone, whether you're a fan of Kenshin or not. Go ahead and check it out. And even if you haven't seen the anime, go ahead and read the manga and also watch the anime because that's pretty good as well. So anyways, if you've read the Rurouni Kenshin manga series, and let me know your thoughts about it in the comments section below. Let me know what you think about that third arc and how much you want that to be animated. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.